So, this is week 2, and we're going to be continuing our discussion of cognitive biases, including, of course, confirmation bias, but also something called hindsight bias, which I'll bet you can sort of figure out, what that is already. Kind of like Monday morning quarterbacking. Overconfidence. People can really have a sense, and you probably know people, and you may have experienced moments yourself where you're very, very certain about an answer to something or about what's going on, and yeah, you're kind of struck by how that's not exactly the case. And also what we call heuristics, and that's a fancy way of saying applying schema or like jumping to a conclusion. You applying a sort of schemata or like template for what is likely happening in this particular situation or that. And there's a couple of important heuristics that people apply in multiple circumstances, including representativeness and also availability. And we'll talk a little bit about those heuristics this week as well. And also, I want to get into like what makes a good research study, because you want to be able to guard against all of these biases, and you want to make sure that what you're doing isn't going to be ethically suspect, harm people, lead people in the wrong direction. So you really, really want, to know what's going on. And I think the other thing that we're going to be talking about later when it comes to all of these biases and heuristics that we apply in various circumstances, they're dependent upon this remarkable network of linked neurons, that we've got up here in our brains. And this chunk in the front, that frontal lobe, is going to play a very significant role in, jumping to conclusions about social decision making, about what's likely to be happening in this circumstance or that. So I want us to pay particular attention to these frontal lobe networks. They're going to be engaged and in the development of these frontal lobe networks. Because when we're, developing biases and we're developing heuristics on how to, engage in different circumstances, well, you need to get experience in those circumstances. And you need to actually make errors and mistakes in those social environments. So what's interesting is how our brains, we're going to see, are made up of smaller cells that are called neurons that are linked to each other at what we call synaptic connections. And those connections are changeable. The term that's used is they have plasticity. They can, strengthen connections. They can weaken connections. You can lose neuronal circuits, and you can sort of grow new connections. And all of that is in response in the frontal lobe to, the experiences that you're having and the sort of signals that you're receiving. Like, are you rewarded for this activity or this behavior? Are you punished for this activity or this behavior? What are the rules, the social rules that I need to figure out? And how do I navigate and make, quick judgments and decisions that let me, effectively sort of engage? So that's what we're going to be, setting ourselves up for as we continue here. But we're going to start with a discussion of all these different biases and how we would organize, an effective research experiment.